Joining me on stage now are Paddy Hickey, former CEO of the Hickey's Group, and Stuart Fitzgerald, CEO of Fitzgerald Pear. Paddy and Stuart will be discussing pharmacy from an investor's perspective. Stuart is CEO of Fitzgerald Pear and is one of Ireland's leading pharmacy sector financial experts. Stuart provides strategic financial advice to operators in Ireland and the UK. He has a strong background in corporate finance and advises a large range of international corporates and SMEs on their acquisition, disposal and corporate fundraising strategies. Paddy established Hickey's Pharmacy Group in 1995, growing it into Ireland's largest family-owned pharmacy chain with 36 locations before selling to Uniphar in 2020. A qualified pharmacist since 1991, he now invests in businesses with a conservative approach, being mindful of investing in sectors where he feels he can bring his expertise to the table. Very welcome both. Paddy, that was the first question to you. What challenges, risks are there likely to be what challenges, risks are likely to be when picking an investor, to invest with?
Yeah, it was you're investing in your partnering with someone, so like any business, the key thing is which is going to make that business succeed or fail is the management, and it's even more so in a professional service like a pharmacy. And it was what do you look for in a management, and what is an investor? I'm not talking about pharmacy per se, I'm talking about investing generally. What does an investor look for in a management? And the world's greatest investor says he looks for energy, intelligence and honesty. The grunt of the last one, the first two are much use. And when you go in partnering with someone then in terms of the person making the transition, what sort of pharmacist would you wish to back and partner? If someone can make the transition that Joe talked about earlier from being an employee to being an owner. And I suppose what characteristic are you most looking for there? And it's realism and responsibility and ownership in the mentality. So, when the shutter doesn't go down at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening, it's not head office, your phone, you kind of sort it out yourself. And you all know that from doing it the hard way. And so, in terms of partnering, and again, from my working with MML, Private Equity Firm, again, they partner very much with good management, partner with the right people. The right people can navigate the challenges you'll get and the surprises you'll get. And 80% of the surprises are always on the downside. So, people who can take that adversity and who will take that ownership, you back those. But you also need to make sure that your objectives then are aligned as well. So it's the main thing that I would look for is the person the right person, and what tests, what are you looking for in that person? You're looking for the realism, the ownership, the responsibility to make that transition, because it is a transition between an employee and being an owner.
Thanks, Paddy. Stuart, there's countless different models that you may come across when you see an investor partnering with an entrant pharmacist. Could you work through some of those examples?
Yeah, I can. You are right, and it's been covered by a number of the speakers. There's a number of different models. You have everything from a traditional partnership, where you may have a very passive investor, and you may have a young pharmacist that they know and they want to back, and that's kind of a pure partnership, and the division of the equity is something that gets negotiated between them. Deferred consideration has been mentioned a couple of times today, and I think that's quite interesting because it becomes an investor of sorts, a quasi-investor. So what we're seeing is, and I think one of the gentlemen asked the question, what is an MBO? An MBO is a management buyout where the vendor is supporting, or the previous owner is supporting the management team that works in the business to become the next owner. And often what we see to make those deals work is that owner will leave behind deferred consideration. So no one went through that. So that is a model, Leigh.
Yep.
I see a number. There's at least 2 or 3 individuals in the room who are part of the IPOS scheme, and the IPOS scheme, not without its flaws, but conceptually it actually worked quite well, and that helped younger pharmacists to get on the ladder, and the funder, in this case Uniphar, was able to exit over a period. So there's been lots of models that have been a replica or a version of that scheme. And then I think you have kind of sophisticated investors like someone like Paddy, who's been there, who's done it before, who's interested in backing ambitious and honest and hard-working young pharmacists. And that arrangement is something that would be negotiated between the parties, but ultimately what you're getting there is you're getting expertise and you're getting capital, because they're the two, I suppose, fundamental ingredients that you're going to need to make the project work.
Yeah, and Paddy, I suppose from the investor side, what returns would you usually seek? Would you be looking for? Once you join with an entrant pharmacist.
So once like Fitzgerald Power and other accountants often their projections, but you don't bank on projections, and you've all seen the projections where there's X number of 100,000s or more in the bank at the end of 6 years, but I've never actually seen that happen in practice. So what returns you get, there's no guarantees in life. You got to know that you're going to get adversity. You're going to have to. That's why I would be interested. I feel that we should back the equity. We take the risk as well. As back again, private equity is a combination of loan and so you're getting a return on loan, and you're also getting equity, which there's no upside or no limit to the upside. So the returns are going to be a function of how well the business is run, and you may have favourable. And again, it's important to remember as well the time scale. If any of you are thinking in terms of a partner investor, think of their time scale and your time scale, because like we'll say in private equity, they have to exit between 5 and 10 years, whereas on the other hand, like a private investor or a family office, they can stay for the longer term, and they can navigate the changes of life and the changes of priorities in life, but that the partner pharmacist might wish to have. And again, does the pharmacist want to ultimately, as someone touched on earlier, buy the business in entirety over stages, or are they happy to have a partner for the longer term? Because ownership of a business is, I can tell you, is a lonely enough journey, and it's good to have a partner, and it can be good. That's why a lot of professional services like Joe or doctors and so on, often they usually don't start off on their own. They set up with other partners, and that's something which is worth considering as well. And it's all going to feed into the return. So it's not just an economic return; it's a return on all of your effort.
And Stuart, could you give a brief overview of the acquisition process?
Yeah, so it generally starts with a teaser document. So a teaser document is like a 2-page overview of the opportunity, which doesn't identify the asset, but is sufficient to whet the appetite of the database that it goes to. So, like, if you're interested in buying a pharmacy, the most important thing to do to begin with is to get yourself on the database of Brenson Lawler and Fitzgerald Power, who are the two agents who operate in this market, selling and buying pharmacies. So the teaser document goes out to the distribution list. We then invite people to come forward to sign non-disclosure agreements, express their interest. Once those non-disclosure agreements are signed, the information memorandum, which is like a 25-page document, which sets out all of the commercial, financial details and the history of the business, that goes out to the people who signed the NDAs. We generally allow maybe 2 to 3 weeks for bids to come in. Those bids are non-binding in nature, but they should be accompanied with proof of finance to show that you can actually fund the deal. And maybe that comes back to the purpose of this section around finding the capital and the equity gap that's needed to make a deal work. So once the offers come in, they're assessed between the vendor and the advisor. There's a preferred bidder or bidders selected that are invited into due diligence. There's heads of terms agreed. The data room is opened, a virtual data room is opened. The advisors, legal, commercial, financial, tax, go through the data room, complete diligence. Kind of running in parallel is a funding process with the bank. And once bank heads of terms are agreed and the share purchase agreement, the legal contract is in place, the deal completes. You're probably talking about a 6-month process from teaser document issuing to money in the bank, assuming there's no speed bumps. But there's always speed bumps.
Yeah, Paddy, I suppose, why do you think pharmacy is such a good investment? Sorry, you want to come back?
Before I come to that, I'd just like to add to what Stuart said, and that the whole process is a very much more drawn out process than you might think at the beginning.
It only took Stuart 5 minutes there to explain.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like 5 minutes when you're doing it. It's much more drawn out and expensive process than it had been before. So we all have plenty of cases, or familiar with plenty of cases where someone is moving along towards the altar. They've spent a lot on fees out of their post-tax saved income, and it doesn't transact at the end of it. And that's an extremely frustrating and disappointing process for a would-be purchaser. It's also a very exhausting process for a seller, because a seller is trying to get all this information at the same time as running a business, and probably not telling the staff and so on, and trying to keep a secret in Ireland as well, which, as you know, isn't always that easy. As I say, secret in Dublin is something you say to one person at a time. So it's a hard work process, And if a prospective purchaser is unsuccessful at a couple of those, it can be a very demoralizing process. So it's another reason why you'd partner with very good people like Stuart Power, like Joe and his colleagues, who like the people in Bank of Ireland, who really know it and can hold your hand in that process. And it's also, I would think, why it could make sense to partner with someone who has been there before as well. Now we're finally getting around to answering your question.
Having said all that.
Pharmacy can be a good investment. There's no guarantees in it. It can be a good investment. Like any, what does an investor look at in any investment? Is the business one that they can understand and know and understand? Well, most as pharmacists here, we'd like to think the answer to that is yes. Are the economics of the business favourable? Again, you wouldn't be buying it if you didn't think they were. What about the management and the people who will run it? And that's specifically the partner pharmacist in the kind of scenario we're talking about. And fourthly, can it be bought at a reasonable price? And if any one of those fails, it's not going to be a great investment. But it can be a good investment. But like any private business, it's an illiquid investment. So you're signing up in something A that can go to zero. So your life savings can go to zero. And B, it's not like a public company share that you can sell, phone up Davies tomorrow morning and sell. It's an illiquid investment. You're locked in. You might be there for 10 years or more, and you've got to be prepared to sign up for that. And a bit like selling your house, and at the end of it, as somebody who recently bought a pharmacy said to me, it's easy enough it's not that difficult to get into pharmacy. It's not always the easiest, as anyone who has sold a business. It can be challenging enough, the whole sale process as well. So it can be a good investment. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it could be, but it's not a home run or a no-brainer either.
And it's probably quite a steady industry, right? Where your potential to get a hockey stick return is probably limited. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. Before the last crash, like pharmacists were probably looking at property developers and saying this was wonderful, and they it didn't collapse either. So therefore, it is a steady Eddie business. And again, that's not for every type of investor. Then, for that reason, so we've seen private equity invest in pharmacy it has generally felt mixed results because they need the fast roll up at a certain price and then an exit. On the other hand, a more patient investor probably would make more sense for a more gradual business like pharmacy. It's like Howard Marks, the American investor, said that in any one of the last 30 years, his fund has never been the top fund, but over a 30-year period, it's been the top because it hasn't had those collapses. It's got a little bit along all the time.
And it kind of is almost, I wouldn't quite like to say recession-proof, but it doesn't track the economic cycles in the same way that something like property development might. But I think what we certainly see is a lot of people who have been present in the market, like Paddy, getting back into the market to reinvest. And it comes back to this kind of almost circle of competence piece where if there's a couple of things you know and understand well, it makes sense to follow what you've done before and to try to get a return from that market. So I think what we tend to see is, and there's a number of them in the room, people who've had a good experience, understand the market well, understand that it's unlikely to be an exponential return, but understand that the returns are probably predictable enough in lots of situations.
Well, you know what Mark Twain said about predictions are very difficult to make, especially about the future. But the
you've got a saying for every.
I have, yes. Some of them I've got from you, I might add, over the years.
All the good ones.
All the good ones. Where was I there? What was your point there just before?
You were about Mark Twain. You were about to do a synopsis of his literature, I think.
No.
Predictability.
Yeah, predictability, yeah. It is a professional service business, so a lot of it revolves around the pharmacist and the customer experience with the pharmacist as well. And among professional services businesses, apart from the more recent in private equity interest in accountancy roll-ups, they don't actually tend to sell for very large multiples. So you get a business with calibration contracts or whatever that last for a long time. They'll sell at 8, 10, 12 time multiples. Professional services businesses historically 2, 3, 4 multiples with a deferred element. I mean, the deferred element which has come into pharmacy in recent years is good. It aligns people a lot better. It's about time it happened. It is because it has become more of a buyer than less of a seller's market. So there's a degree of predictability, but it's still revolving around the professional experience that the patient gets when they walk into the pharmacy. So provided that is right. And that's another reason why not that many non-pharmacists successfully own pharmacies, except apart from at scale. They don't get it the same way. You can't have non-lawyers owning law firms, and you don't, apart from recently private equity and assets and so on in accountancy, you generally don't have the non-professional making a success of owning any professional service business.
I would agree with all that, and I am impressed to see the evolution in your thinking in relation to valuations since you've moved from a seller to a purchaser.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Thanks very much. Any questions for the guys from the audience?
Leigh, could I make one point while people are gathering their thoughts, and maybe there's no questions? I think like owning a business, particularly when you start, it's like parenthood. You don't know what you're doing at the start. It's very difficult. It's very stressful, and being on your own can be very lonely. Paddy mentioned that, and I think to pick up, because it's maybe a point that we haven't fully captured in this talk, I think, yeah, you get the support from the wholesalers, the symbol groups, from the likes of Fitzgerald Power, but I think having a mentor in your corner who has been there, done that, made the mistakes, because there's none of us in the room that have ever run a business that it's all been plain sailing. There's countless mistakes. You're going to make them. It's inevitable. And I think if you have someone who's been there on the journey and they've made the mistakes, they understand, where the risks are, I think helping to navigate the challenges that you deal with, there's huge value to that over and above the capital that an investor can bring. So I think that's just an important point to capture for anyone who's looking to get on the ladder.
Very good. Any questions? I think you're off the hook. Thanks very much. Thanks.